Welcome to the Common Cool podcast,
where we discuss the power of addiction,
the art of suffering,
and the joy of freedom.
Welcome to the Common Cool podcast. My name is Miguel.
And I'm Joe.
And we're here now with our guest, Daniel Lionett. And he is going to talk to us about a very cool organization that he's a part of, he's involved with. We realize that 12-step fellowships are not always the only solution for people. They have worked wonders for people like probably all three of us here, but it's not for everybody. So everybody needs something a little different. In fact, in one of our episodes, we had Jordan, who talked about how he got clean with yoga and meditation, after having a very severe heroin and methamphetamine addiction. So it goes to show there's a different path for everybody, and we want to show all those different paths as much as we can. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to our guest, Daniel. He's going to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about himself.
Hey, everybody. My name is Dan Lionett, and I am a person in long-term recovery, which means that I'm also have a lot of experience as an addict, as an alcoholic. So I'll try to give a little background on me, so you can understand the context in which I was brought into the recovery spotlight. I born in Seattle, 1968. My parents headed in a Volkswagen bus towards San Francisco after the hippie movement. There was hippie commune activity. That was a very difficult time for kids. I mean, everybody's parents were having fun, but a lot of the kids were neglected, abused, trying to take care of parents on acid, all that stuff, so challenge. We ended up we were headed towards San Francisco. We made it to a small town in Sonoma County and, found some hippies and kind of made a stay here. My mother attempted, with my stepfather's advice, to start her own hippie commune here in, this little town of Cloverdale. And, I still live in the little town. The hippie commune didn't really happen. But as you can imagine, I was introduced to drugs, alcohol, oddities in behavior at a very young age. So that was kind of my introduction to substances, was, sipping on somebody's Mickey's or Lucky Lager, which I don't even know if either of those are still around anymore. And marijuana was probably my first drug of choice as a very young person, probably like 7. So I got introduced to some substances at a very young age. And to be honest, it didn't become an issue for me necessarily immediately. I drank, and I didn't, when I was, in middle school, I started experimenting with alcohol. I didn't have that experience where it's like, oh, I feel like I fit in with everybody because my father is a politician and a life insurance salesman. So I have some heredity that points towards, getting along with people pretty well and, being able to, fit in without substances. I ended up in the music scene. That was one of the things that happened between young person in high school. Got into music. It's the only reason I really stayed in high school was because I had a music teacher that told me if I didn't pass my classes, I didn't get to stay. So, once I got out of high school, I was still having a lot of fun with drugs and alcohol, and I'm a garbage pail addict, meaning that I take whatever you got and then see where that takes me as well. So, after getting out of high school, getting into a band, we had a really good run there for a little while. Won the local Battle of the Bands in 1990. I'm in college right now. It's funny when I say that number, I think to myself, a lot of these kids were not here yet. For me, the reason why I point this band out as an aspect of my story is that I was the lead singer in a popular band. We had tons of fans and mosh pits and women and all of that stuff. And then my band broke. We had that thing where that being married to 3 other guys wasn't working out, So we spent a lot of time together. And when that happened, that's kind of the tipping point for this guy is that, I didn't realize that I was 98% ego, and that when that ship sailed, I was going to be left with a broken sense of self, and I was going to medicate the heck out of myself to try to not feel that grief of this massive loss and gut punch to my ego. So that's where things started to go from having good times. The parties got smaller, got into methamphetamine. Pretty soon I recognized that I really didn't want to be at a party. I wanted to be alone to commiserate with my own internal damages, if you will. So when you're lonely, you're emotionally and mentally unstable, and the party only involves yourself, there might be an issue. Just maybe. So that's kind of my segue to getting to recovery. I was someone that I had to try several times to get to a place where I could be successful in recovery. So by the very late 90s, I was looking into recovery because I knew where those people went over in that room over there. And so I started getting into that. Initially I found out that I was an overachiever because I did step 4 and 5 of a 12-step program before I jumped out. A lot of people leave at step 3, right? Or after step 3. So anyway, the problem I had is my complacency issue. As soon as life started to get better and the relationship started to work or the job, was stable, then I'd think, oh man, I got this. And I would fall back into a pattern of substance misuse. So that's kind of where I started into this whole operation. I am currently just celebrated 11 years in recovery. It hasn't been a pretty, it's not pretty all the time. I don't run a perfect program. I think if you do, you better go check your humility meter. Because it's not about being perfect at doing recovery. It's about being, willing to look inside and see what those mechanisms are that keep feeding you back to behaviors that are unbecoming and don't serve you. So recently, in the last few years, in 2018, I got a work injury, which kind of ended my career in the lumber industry, which wasn't really necessarily something I wanted to do. I mean, that's putting a bow on it. I worked at a sawmill. So, after that injury, I had to look at a career change, and obviously, you could tell by my introduction that I wasn't focused on education or academics. It was more rock and roll and women and drugs. So I had to kind of reintegrate integrate myself into the academic world. And I was given an opportunity to do that. And at this point, I've got, 8 years in recovery, and found a passion for sponsoring people. I found a passion for having a deeper knowledge of the addiction model and treatment modalities. So I went into my local community college and started doing some human services stuff, and studied to be an addiction counselor. Fell into another passion, which once you open the gate, you never know, but advocacy became kind of a big focus of mine. It's there's a lot of people that are unrepresented or not represented in a solid fashion. For example, here in Sonoma County in Northern California, I live in one of the richest communities probably in the North Bay area, and we don't have a treatment facility that caters to people on Medi-Cal. We send them to Lake County, an adjacent county, which has got probably a third of the tax revenue, all that stuff. It's just, it's deplorable. And, I'll get into, pushing on those levers a little bit, because I found myself in a place where if you make enough noise, you can have some impact and make some positive things happen. So I'll give you my introduction to how I got into collegiate recovery community. I was at the college, I'm taking some courses and starting to get into this idea of advocacy. I'm looking around for this recovery group that's supposed to be on campus called Students for Recovery. And so I found out who the advisor to the group was. And I said, hey, what's going on with this Students for Recovery thing? And my professor says, nothing. You want to be the president? So there I was.
It was like a dead, the group was like dead. I mean, they tried to start it and they couldn't breathe any life into it. And they were looking for someone to do that.
Yeah. From what I understood, there were 2 people that met and had meetings on campus, and they had an AA meeting on campus.
Okay.
And they called themselves herb dealers, which I thought was very, very cool. But I went a different direction with things. So what happened for me again is making noise, taking opportunities. An opportunity came through where a nonprofit was saying, hey, here's an application to join this Collegiate Recovery Leadership Academy. And I'm just starting to get really into schoolwork and homework. So I'm like, this would probably be good practice for me to fill this application out. So I did. And in November of 2022, I believe, I jumped on a plane and went to Washington, D.C. because they accepted me into this leadership academy. I got to go to D.C. They did a big presentation, had, employee from SAMHSA in the room. They had some amazing recovery stories, people that went from the incarceration and methamphetamine to working at the local government level, at the county government level, and now working in the White House, So some really neat inspirational stories. And the focus of that's called the SAFE Project, Stop the Addiction Fatality Epidemic. Their focus is to try to inspire students to go back to their community colleges, universities, whatever, and have positive impact, do a positive impact project. And it was neat. There was people from all around the country, Hawaii, Pennsylvania, Montana, everything. And And I was introduced to a format that I'll talk about a little later, but an all recovery meeting, which I had never heard of before. So it was interesting. I did at my first all recovery meeting. I'm in this room and, going around a circle and describing, and it's like, oh, I'm at Miami Law and I'm studying to be a neuroscientist, and hey, I'm an old guy who's trying to get his life together in community college. And I felt safe there. I felt safe saying that, and I felt valued because I had a lot more recovery time than most of the people that were there. So that was kind of a neat aspect of that. So my intention in the positive impact on my community college was to boost, reinvigorate this Students for Recovery Club and have an impact, through awareness, through providing resources, through trying to get through the stigma process. Like, it's really sad that so many people struggle with mental health and substance misuse issues, and yet they don't want to speak about it because they feel like they're going to be judged. And so that's kind of, a big part of this motion is to try to break that apart. So I'll read my mission statement for the little club here. It says, bringing awareness to substance misuse and addictive processes in the student population, offering support, resources, and fellowship based on inclusivity and diversity.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Yeah. What do I mean by inclusivity and diversity? I grew up in a town with a lot of hardcore recovery people. The NA meetings I went to as a young person, the tagline was "Don't take nothing, no matter what." That was it. And so all of a sudden, these addicts become doctors and say, "Oh, you're on antidepressants. You can't do that. You're loaded." Or somebody on psych meds, for example. So that was my intention by offering a different option, was to include people who were on medically assisted treatment, people that have deep emotional or psychological issues going on and they benefit from medication and don't want to go to a 12-step meeting and feel ostracized or judged. So that was kind of the intention. I was able to get the SAFE project to fund a little operation. We had an awareness event at the college. We began this kind of campaign of getting Narcan into the hands of the student population. We were exposed immediately to bureaucracy, and red tape, and then also this level of stigma, which I think makes it really difficult for somebody who might be struggling to want to join into a club like Students for Recovery.
Can I ask you a question? When you talk about the red tape, like when you were trying to get Narcan on campus, can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I can explain it through my campus, but I had a colleague in the Leadership Academy that was working at UC Davis, trying to get Narcan into the hands of the students on that campus. And when he looked around and tried to find, naloxone, said, "Yeah, come to Student Health, $25.
Yep.
You want to charge people for Narcan?"
Yeah. Can you explain what that is for some people that may not know?
Yeah. Narcan is the most common brand of naloxone. Naloxone is an opioid overdose reversal medication.
Okay.
Typically in a nasal sprayer with a little plunger. You find somebody, they're unresponsive. You shake them and they don't wake up. There's, maybe it's an opioid overdose. You take out your Narcan, give them a squirt in the nose, and it's not a silver bullet, meaning it doesn't guarantee you that you're going to bring someone back from respiratory failure. And that's what happens, with opioid overdose. Is the first thing to go is just kind of quit breathing or get really, really challenging breathing levels. But yeah, and it was interesting because I'm studying all these classes and I had just learned about the operation of opioid receptors and what happens there. Like I said, coming from an NA culture that says, oh, well, if you're on medically assisted treatment, you just switch drugs. Not knowing the science behind opioid overdose reversal medication, yeah, I can see how somebody might see it that way. Once you understand the science and about it, around it, you realize that the potential for someone to be an opioid addict for life is a real thing. Recovery for some people doesn't mean I'm going to have abstinence from all substances. There's many pathways to recovery. But once you understand that chemically, the naloxone or Narcan is basically, there's little opioid receptors. They're like little cups. And when you take opioids, the cup gets filled with that and you go, yay, I'm happy. I'm an opioid receptor and I'm getting what I want. When you take naloxone, what it basically does is it displaces that opioid from the receptor. And when you talk about opioids, they have a very long shelf life, 20 minutes or something, a couple hours, I don't know. But the medically assisted treatment options, they have a tendency to be long lasting. So it keeps your opioid receptor busy for a very long time, which in turn makes it possible for someone to go to work and not have to stop at lunch and go get a fix. So for me, that was really enlightening. And had I not been involved with human services, learning, educating myself about, the chemical processes that go along with opioid overdose, I would have went along with the people at the NA meeting because those were my people, right? So
Yeah, that's such an interesting angle that you're covering, which is sort of like some almost discrimination that people get in certain fellowships because of their medication needs. And I think it is a lack of full scientific understanding that creates that. So I'm very happy to hear that there's organizations like SAVE who are trying to help people out irrespectively of, what kind of journey they're in. And I'm curious just to better understand, more about SAVE. So it's like a club, right, that people join. And what are the mechanics inside once you join? Like, are there meetings? How often do people meet? Are there literature, or is it more of a peer system? Just tell us more about that.
yeah, so basically my affiliation with SAFE is kind of a limited thing. I am a member of the Collegiate Recovery Leadership Academy. SAFE is a nonprofit organization. A couple who sent their child, a well-off couple, obviously, because they sent their child to a university and then found out, got the phone call, your 20-year-old just died of opioid overdose. And after feeling that grief, they felt it was their duty to go ahead and try to make a movement to have some change based around that. So Safe Project, they do work with schools. Grade schools. They do work with high schools. They do work with colleges. They do work in their community. It's really important that people understand that a nonprofit organization like that they have their needs that need to be met as well. Like financially, they have to look for funding. Sometimes they can get it on a federal level or a state level. Sometimes they have to ask people in the community for donations. So that's the basic gist of Safe Project. Is there an advocacy group, nonprofit organization that is getting the word out about opioid overdose? Some of the ideas that have come out of this Collegiate Recovery Leadership Academy is placing naloxone along with the defibrillators that they would have on campus. If somebody has cardiac arrest, they go and they get the paddles, or you also go and you get the Narcan. And the neat thing about the naloxone or Narcan is that, let's say somebody was unresponsive and they had cardiac failure, that the medicine isn't going to do anything. It is opioid receptor specific. So you can't hurt anybody by squirting Narcan up their nose. They also, there's some other forms of Narcan. One that I just recently was exposed to, there's injectable, which a lot of people get weird around needles, including me, even though that's not my thing. But I don't feel like I'm knowledgeable enough to stick a needle in somebody. That's basically what it comes down to. And another thing that I've seen just recently is they actually have it in kind of EpiPen form. So you just slap it on the skin, boom, done, which would be really nice to get a hold of some of that. But we get what we get, and probably the nasal spray is the most economical option.
Is it probably the easiest to kind of administer too? But just something
absolutely. And an opioid overdose, reversal medication, applying it is very simple. There are some simple rules you should know, but we do Narcan training type of events on campus all the time. We go into classrooms, we bring Narcan, we say, hey, you might want to have this in your backpack. And we explain the process. When somebody is in opioid overdose, you want to make sure they're on their back when you apply the medication, and then you want to turn them on their side, and make sure they're okay. And one thing that I missed to say is always immediately call 911. Get medical professionals en route, as you administer, or, first thing first, but it's for me, the Safe Project was my window into advocacy and my passion for it. And like I said, it was an application I decided I thought it would be cool to fill out for practice. And then I got exposed to this whole wonderful component of advocacy as a modality for helping people that are suffering from addictive processes. I kind of want to shift gears if I can a little bit and tell you a little bit about the all recovery format. So I went to an all recovery format meeting. It was very informal. Some of the differences are there's in the literature, there's no mention of God or a higher power unless somebody brings it up during the meeting, which is fine too. But people who are affected by addiction. So family members are welcome at an all recovery meeting. People that just support the recovery lifestyle or want to understand it more are welcome to come to our meetings. People on medically assisted treatment are welcome to come to our meetings. Buprenorphine, Suboxone, methadone. We cater to all addictive processes. And I think it's pretty clear to anybody that studies addictive processes that there's usually one going on all the time, for all of us. And, in our case, we made the literature fit the idea that we were trying to get across. So we cater to people with process or behavioral addictions like gambling, sex and love, shopping, eating, gaming, internet use, smoking, exercise. And this one's for you, Miguel, work. So we can get addicted to our work.
I can attest.
So, trying to make awareness, being conscious of the issue and trying to understand that, I'll use a recovery in the 12-step terminology, but we're not bad people getting good. We're sick people trying to get well. To me, that pretty much describes the focus of our mission. When we have a recovery meeting on campus, more often than not, there is someone from the psychological services department will come and join us and listen in and be of support to students who might need to talk and they don't feel safe doing it in our group. That's how we try to include everyone. We make the meetings available to any student, and we do that in hopes that people will be intrigued. Like almost everyone, believe it or not, is affected by opioid overdose. They know someone, they have a friend or family member who's passed or come close to pass. In Sonoma County, we are looking at about a 60% rate of return on illicit street drugs. 60% of them are testing positive for fentanyl. That is I think it's a really important point to cover is that, people can unknowingly ingest fentanyl. And the danger in that is there is absolutely no awareness of that case and no tolerance in the body for opioid. So a very small amount, something that an addict might be like happy that they got so much, of this opioid. Somebody who unknowingly ingests it through pressed pills, it's in your cocaine, your meth. They're even finding it in marijuana, ecstasy. And, it's hard to understand the logic of a drug dealer giving somebody a substance that can take them out because you don't have return customers when they're not breathing.
Yeah, you're killing your customers.
Yeah. It's not a good business model. But it's such an addictive substance that the drug dealers are willing to take that chance that somebody might die, knowing that they're going to get so addicted to the fentanyl in whatever drug they choose to be, the purveyor of. It's there's a little balance there. Drug dealers put it in to get people addicted. They don't want people to die, but that happens. It's more about money than it is about morals. I think that's fair to say.
It's a chemical hook, they get you hooked to that chemical, and you keep coming back, and it's hard to, and it's so, I mean, from my understanding, it's so easy to kind of make and readily available. There's like a lot of things that are really, really scary about fentanyl, and hearing what you say, like it could be in anywhere, so a kid, like you had mentioned, a freshman in college going to college and around a bunch of people they don't really know yet, and want to, some peer pressure, and someone tells you, hey, this is ecstasy, something they may be familiar with, like here's some ecstasy, and they're like, oh, I've done that before, and it's like,
yeah. Actually, a very good point that how dangerous it is, right? Because I think that in the past there was a level of danger that was only introduced after you got certain drugs, right? Like if you were smoking marijuana, if you were exploring with ecstasy as a teenager, okay, maybe you're going to be fine if you're not an addict, right? But now what we're saying is like, look, it's gotten so bad that a teenager may be doing somewhat harmless experimentation with just marijuana and say ecstasy, and they could just die on that first try because of the fentanyl. That's pretty alarming.
And the ignorance too,
Oh, just to bring some context to that idea, when we were, say, doing cocaine or whatever as addicts, you thought maybe I'll get some baby laxative in it and I'll, have to be in the bathroom for a few hours. That's a lot different than I might stop breathing. That's the what's happening currently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What kind of response are you getting from, some of when you inform people, which I think, it's brilliant that, now they're like, there's this advocacy going to grade schools, going to high schools, going to colleges, and really pressing the point, like, this is all very dangerous, because they, like you had said, like, as a kid, like experimenting, obviously we didn't have red flags going up when we were kids, we're like, just like, oh, I'll take this, I'll take that, now, like for them to think, because there wasn't anything that was really killing us, we never, but, now like setting that red flag, making sure that they have that in their brain, like this is, this could have, anything could have fentanyl in it,
Absolutely. Well, I'm proud to say that my organization, the Students for Recovery Group, which was spawned from the inspiration from Safe Project, we have gotten hundreds and hundreds of doses of Narcan into the student population. There's kids that when we have events where we set up our table and we're doing this awareness campaign, hey, it's Students for Recovery, and people come by and you go, hey, do you know what this is? The Narcan? And some will say no, and some will say, yeah, I got it in my backpack. That is the key to the opportunity to save a life, is if you have it on your person, in your car, in your backpack. Quick story, because I think it really warms my heart and talks about the root of the cause that I'm trying to get across. We have a student, a young lady, wants to remain anonymous, but she's been coming to our meetings. It's really good for people who only have experience with 12 steps. There's a different thing when you could talk about your psych meds, or you can talk about your relationship, or you could talk about your mental unwellness. This young lady has, she has Narcan in her backpack. She has it in her car. She still hangs out with people that use. And just recently, within the last couple of weeks, she went to a bonfire party out at the coast. And sure enough, somebody started screaming, Narcan, Narcan, Narcan. And she had it. She had it in her car. She ran and got it. And she saved somebody's life very, very possibly. One thing I do want to mention about naloxone or Narcan is that it has a very short shelf life, and the opioids have a longer shelf life. So when you give somebody opioid reversal medication, you may have to give it more than once. In this case, they did not respond. You wait 2 to 3 minutes and give them a second dose. And hopefully simultaneously you're getting emergency services on the way, some medical professionals en route. I have heard of people needing to be hit 5 times with the naloxone. I think it has a shelf life of about 20 minutes. So somebody could come out of opioid overdose, and when the naloxone wears off, they could go back into opioid overdose. I think that's kind of important to mention. Yeah, so, the focus, like I said, it's super common, probably in my view, more common than not, that someone who has an addictive process issue also has mental, emotional challenges, if you will. And so that's why we try to work directly with the student psychological services. We promote that, my campus has an incredible amount of resources, and there's thousands of kids running around who have no clue. So that's part of the awareness campaign, is saying, hey, if you need to talk to somebody anonymously, call Student Health Services, make an appointment, go in and talk to a therapist. I'm a therapy guy. I'm a 12-step guy, but I'm a therapy guy too. I'll take it all. If I find out that one of my professors is a therapist, I'll set up office hours to get some free therapy while I talk about my homework. I'm into it.
That's awesome. Yeah. So these all recovery format meetings, where do you find more information about those? Is that something that you learn through SAFE, or is that something that, you kind of discovered on your own?
I actually Googled it when I wanted to start with my baseline. All recovery meeting format. If you Google it, it'll send you a form. Like I said, in the case of Santa Rosa Junior College Students for Recovery, we changed the literature to fit our ideals, our hopes, aspirations for having an inclusive recovery group. But yeah, the basic outline of an all recovery format meeting is right there on the computer. Just like everything these days, right? So I want to quickly shout out to a couple of local nonprofit organizations doing an amazing amount of work in communities all across this country. They're spurred by people who have relatable life experiences, who have lost someone to, say, opioid overdose or drug addiction or suicide. Suicidal ideation is a very common manifestation of co-occurring disorders where you have mental issues and you try to solve them with drugs and you end up with no hope or reason to want to stay around. So I think that's kind of important to put together. I want to share one quick thing here is that part of my studies for school, I was introduced to the local county strategic plan for fighting substance use disorders in our county. So like I said, our county for some reason doesn't have any inpatient services for someone on Medi-Cal, which is to me horrendous. What happens when people have drug-induced psychosis? They go to the emergency room. The most expensive thing, and guess what? 90% of the time, the person who shows up, they don't have insurance. Sometimes they're homeless, they're being served by the county, and it's actually costing the county more money for not putting resources out there to deal with this kind of stuff. So they think it's like, oh, well, we'll just send them to the emergency room. The emergency room is the most expensive place you can send somebody. And the county is the one who gets basically ultimately stuck with the bill. And what I'm trying to say is investing in resources for your community actually can save your community money because of things like this local nonprofit that we've done a whole bunch of work with. It's called Face to Face. It's a harm reduction nonprofit organization. Initially, it was created during the AIDS crisis. So trying to get, the HIV crisis, trying to get clean needles to people. Harm reduction is an interesting topic, but they were able to get funding to have a mobile psychiatric unit. So, an opioid overdose unit. So instead of the cops showing up and the paramedics showing up, if it's clearly somebody like a police officer notices this person's obviously either has serious mental illness or they're in psychosis, they can send out this mobile unit and have people that are trained to talk to people that are in a psychiatric emergency. Guess what? At the emergency room, a lot of nurses are sick of seeing people come in whacked out on drugs. They don't understand that the psychosis is directly related to, being up for 7 days, if you will.
So I have a question for you. So just sort of to recap a little bit too. So there is the SAFE project, and then there is the Students for Recovery organization that is sort of inspired from the SAFE project, and that's the organization that you're part of and you're sort of leading. Separately, there is the All Recovery format meetings. And I guess we said earlier that is what people can attend, and there's information online that we're going to share with people. If people are struggling, that could be a very good meeting for somebody that wants something more general, all kinds of it could be social media addiction, it could be drug addiction, sex addiction, etc. So it's a very inclusive meeting. So that's awesome that we cover that. But what about if people want to get involved more on the advocacy side? Like, what would you recommend for people that are students and non-students? Like, what are some starting points?
Great question. We have done some work in the past and are in the future plan to do some work with the local behavioral health and human services director for our county. There's going to be an event at the college that is open to the community. I don't have a flyer for it yet, but it's going to be on April 16th. And the community is welcome to come and check that out. It's going to be like a resource fair. It's interesting. The SAFE project is sending some people out to be a part of it. It's put on by the Sonoma County Health and Human Services SUD director. And they are also working with a nonprofit called Rise Together from the East Bay that those people collaborating together are bringing in a professional speaking duo, like a storytelling duo, to come and try to give some pizzazz to this event we're going to have at the college. obviously, if anybody on or off campus wants to contact Students for Recovery, I know you said you'd put the email out there as SRJC students, the number 4 recovery at gmail.com. That's gonna give you access to speak with us. If you'd like to come to a meeting, they don't check student IDs, and nor do they really want to. If people from on campus want to check out a Students for Recovery meeting, we want you to be there. There's, also, I would encourage people to contact your assembly people, contact your, this Health and Human Services director. I saw that there was a campaign by the Sonoma County District Attorney's Office. One pill can kill. You see the billboards along the freeway. I reached out to them. The more people that inquire about, hey, what are you doing? That's the opportunity for them to get moving will increase.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's just a matter of like starting to look, and things will pop up fairly quickly. If you like finding the importance of things, as a person struggling, as a person who is in the life of someone who's struggling, even, as a parent raising a child, and having, making sure that they're educated around these topics, and not thinking that it's something they'll address when it becomes a problem. I think that's, probably it's a whole different process when there's already a problem.
That's a fantastic point. And I think, a message to parents is, if kids or teenagers are struggling with drugs, to make sure that there's no shaming, make sure that it's not treated as, hey, you're being a bad teenager. It's more like, hey, you have a challenge and we should try to figure out how to help you out. That's a much more productive tone and more likely to work.
Oh, just interestingly enough, we did some work with a nonprofit that actually was created by one of the professors at our college, whose best friend lost their 17-year-old daughter to opioid overdose after trying to get a Xanax on Snapchat. Apparently, Snapchat is the drug dealer's choice of social media because the interaction pops up, you make a deal, and they'll meet you over there, and then it goes away. So it's untraceable. I really appreciate you guys giving me an opportunity to share.
Yeah, for sure. Just one thing related to what you said. There was a hearing yesterday with people like Mark Zuckerberg, as well as the CEO from Snapchat and TikTok, that basically was about what you're describing. Many parents reported suicides, overdoses, and a bunch of other things that came as dysfunctions coming from social media. So social media, to me, and I am a technologist, so I feel very comfortable saying this, social media is one of the most fatal drugs that we're also facing today. Not just, it doesn't have to be a pill that you take or a powder that you snort. I mean, social media is designed to be addictive. It's by design addictive. So I use social media, but I am aware of the danger. So anyway, just wanted to put that out there. But, I think we're coming to our end here. Thank you so much, man, for coming in and sharing your story and everything that you're doing. And not only is it informational, but I think it's inspirational, right? I mean, it shows people like, hey, you're somebody that went from addiction to now helping a lot of people. And that's so rewarding, right? And now even being back in school and all that. I mean, that's quite a change. So congratulations, first and foremost, and thank you for sharing this.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Dan.
And yeah, I have a purposeful life today, and I think that's really important to point out for people who might be struggling in addictive processes, is that you can overcome them, and in the process of doing that, you will open a world of healing not only to yourself, but to those in your community who also struggle. Thank you guys so much.
Awesome.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said.